Scene 0, take 1.
Welcome to the mathematical world of film ratios, which requires us going back to a time when videos were actually filmed on film. Well, I say go back to, we are filming on film right now. So I am talking to a 35mm camera. Like, there's no sensor over there, it's just film. The photons from me go through the lens, hit some chemicals, and you are seeing those exposures. It's so ridiculous. And as far as we're aware, this is the first ever YouTube video filmed on 35mm film. I mean, there are other videos like short films that were filmed on 35mm and are now on YouTube, but this is it. This is the first time someone has deliberately made a YouTube video for YouTube on 35mm. And the reason no one else has done this before me is because it's so expensive. We had to order like 2,000 feet of film, which gives us just under half an hour of actual filming time. And as it's going through, it's just costing money. Every second at the moment is costing us $1, $1 in raw film. And on top of that, we're going to have to process it afterwards and scan it. And that's an extra $1 a second, which means this is a good time to thank my Patreon supporters. So if you support me on Patreon, just imagine how much you give me as either a fraction or a multiple of $10, because the amount of film that goes through the camera between now and now was $10. And $100 of film is between now, this one's a little bit longer, but not as long as you would expect for $100. And actually, now that we've got like digital cameras where the marginal cost of actually filming is basically $0 a second, why would I be doing this on film? Well, we're in LA. We're in the Keslow. This is a rental house where you can come in and you can like test and hire equipment, which is why we've got all the lighting and focus stuff behind me. And they very kindly let us come in and actually film on film while talking about film. And Patreon supporters, at the very end of the video, I'll mention if you're supporting me now or by the end of the month, you might be able to get some of these of your very, very own because you very kindly funded this whole thing. Oh, and by the way, $100 is up now. So expensive.
Ready?
Scene 1, take 1.
So what is film? Well, basically it's some kind of backing, just so it's got something to stick to. And then the front bit here is a photosensitive chemical that's evenly spread across this. And I've actually made a scale model so you can see this a little bit better. And it's called 35mm film because the outer dimension from there to there is 35mm across. This model is actually a 10:1 scale, and my friend Bec Hill spent a very long time last night counting out all these little holes. So these are the perforations which are used by whatever mechanism, the camera, the projector, to grab the film and move it around. But apart from them, there's nothing to distinguish one frame from another. Just this entire surface is photosensitive. The camera decides where each frame goes. And right now, we are shooting on what's called Super 35. And here is a scale model of what that would look like. It is 24.9mm across, 13.9mm high. And this is designed to fit perfectly between the perforations. So no space wasted. We'll have one frame there, next frame there, next frame there, all the way up. And that is a diagonal ratio of 1.79. And we're going to crop it in slightly. You're watching this on YouTube at a 16:9 ratio. So that's 1.78, and so this is 1.79. We just take a little bit off, and we are done. However, back in the day, this is regular 35, why we call this Super 35. I'm not, by the way, if I make a mistake, we cannot afford a second take, so we're going to push through. So this is 13.9mm, the same height, but it's only 22mm across, and that's because it would expose on the side there and leave room later on for the sound data to be put in. But because we're recording sound separately, I've got a little lapel mic here, We don't have to worry about that. We can do the whole thing from side to side. And oh, and yes, this is green screen green. Can't imagine anyone's gonna take advantage of that. So we are filming on Super 35. However, that is not the only option.
300T color chart.
All right, so at the end of the second shot, we realized we only had maybe, was it 40 foot, Truman, left? And that's not enough to do another shot. And we can't splice film together because it won't survive going through the camera. It's not like a projector. And so, hi Patreons, this is like the end of the film. Here's some random names I picked from my Patreon supporters. Lucky people. They'll keep going until we run through all of the film.
That was perfect.
For the record, if this looks a bit different, we ran out of the old film stock. So this is what we were filming on a moment ago. This is like 200 tungsten. And because we're now out of that one, we're onto this one, which is 250 daylight. So slightly different color, which you might be able to notice. Depends how we process it afterwards, I guess. Anyway, we are here to talk about how the light gets onto the film. And the lens doesn't just project a rectangle, it's a circular lens. You get an image circle. And I don't know if this is exactly to scale because this changes lens to lens, but it's a possible image circle. And you need to block the light below and above. So there's something called a gate in the camera, bit of metal positioned here to block this light, bit of metal up here to block that light. And that's why we can take the image circle and we just end up with our Super 35 rectangle like that. And if you put the gate somewhere else, you'll get a different ratio. And this wouldn't be called Super 35 like 24.9 mil by 13.9 mil. This would be called 3perf. The reason it's called 3perf is these perforations, which are there for practical reasons, have been repurposed as the standard unit for distance along a film strip. So you can see here, if I line that up, it covers 3 perforations. So that's how you measure the height. We're now going to switch to 4perf, and that means we need a gate that's like a little bit more open, and we have to adjust the mechanism which drags the film up each time, so we get a different amount of film, and that takes a while. So we're not going to change it on that camera. We've already got this camera. It's set up for 4perf. So the next shot you see will be filmed with that one. And cut.
Cool.
Happy? Cool.
That was 131 feet.
Nice and tidy.
Very well done.
Well done.
We have shot 3B. This half is 35 millimeter. You're looking at this. It's not bad quality. I'll put that there. Is that clear? I don't know. And in theory, it should be different on the other side. So if I roll over here, this is the 16 mil side. So this is now 16 mil quality. Actually, I can pop that in the center. And we've done our best to try and line up, because this has to have a wider lens because the film is smaller, whereas over here on the bigger 35 mil film, we've got a more narrow lens on it, but we think they're pretty close, and it's the same film stock. So this is 500 tungsten, and this is 500 tungsten. The only difference is the size of it. And that does save a lot of money. So here, there's your 16 mil to scale with the 35 mil on that side. And there's your Super 16. So that's 12.5 mil by 7.4 millimeters. You pop it in there. It's got a ratio of 1.69. So pretty much the standard widescreen you're looking at this in, and each one is exposing that much of the paper. If you want to go even cheaper, there is Super 8. So when I was a university student many years ago, I did some short films on Super 8, and this half again, and both of these only have the perfs on one side because I guess they're too small to need both, and that's Super 8. Isn't that adorable? Look at the size of that. That is, what was that, 5.8 mil by 4 millimeters. And that's 10 times bigger. That's a 10 to 1 of what you're so small. It's just ridiculous. And you won't ever really use this for anything of note. You will see major motion pictures filmed on Super 16. You will go to the cinema and see something on this, even though it's so much smaller than our 35 mil. There's our Super 35 again. And look at the size difference. So this is where the saving comes from. Because this is half the width, it's half as much to buy the same length of film, but because that's half the height, it goes through at half the speed. And because area scales with the square of length, I think that works, you end up spending a quarter of the money. So over here, this is costing me a quarter of the money. This is a much cheaper way to film. Film on 16. The only exception to when filming on 16 is cheaper is if you're also simultaneously running a 35mm camera. That puts the budget way back up again. So we're going to stop running 2 cameras right now.
Sorry, gotta wait
Wait,
for
wait, wait.
Second sticks. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Hit it.
Scene 5, take 1.
I've made a big deal about how this is the first YouTube video being shot on... Bec, you got to be ready to come in. Is this now? No, as in, yep. I've made a big deal about how this is the first YouTube video shot on 35mm film, but I could be beaten because there is a bigger format out there. There is 65mm film, as has just magically made its way into the shot. And look at the size of this. It's twice again compared to our friend 35mm. And, oh, you know, forget this. I'm going to move that out over there. Now, there is the standard way of using 65mm, like we'd already seen with 35. You get a shot like this. This is 5 perf. That's 52.6mm by 23mm. And that lines up right there like that. But we can do so much better. You may have heard of IMAX. IMAX is like the ultimate in film formats, and here is our scale model of IMAX, or rather that is half of it. Here is the scale model of IMAX. That's 70.4mm by 52.6mm. If you're thinking, hang on, how on earth are you going to get this size frame on that film? Well, IMAX goes through the camera horizontally. So instead of, because your limiting dimension is perf to perf, instead of that limiting your big dimension, making that small, and your small or even smaller, now you're limiting the small dimension, and you can have a big dimension. So that fits, whoop, here we are, in, look at that. Isn't that ridiculous? And compare this to our friend 16mm. So you will go to the cinema and see very good films filmed on 16mm, and you will see ones filmed on IMAX, and that is just, like, are they even related? That is just silly. And this is a very good time to make one of the most important points of this video, because our friend here, the IMAX, is a 1.34 ratio, and before, when we were looking at 4 perf, that is also a 1.34 ratio. So when you're talking about film, it's not just aspect ratio. Both of these are the same aspect ratio, but you can see they are very different formats.
Okay.
Yep. Dan, hey.
Sorry about that. I thought it came in a little bit later.
That's right. Yeah, no, it's fine. We picked it up.
Did you skip something that time, or did you?
I didn't do this sideways.
This division.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another 30 feet in here.
Done. Because I'd taken out the 3 perf.
What was the slate for that? 5.
5.
Take 1, right?
That gets everything.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, if you don't care about this division, then it doesn't really matter because no one really does it.
Nah.
We're not talking about steals. Okay. You want to rehearse it one more time, or are you good?
Nah, let's do it. Audio, turning over.
Audio's gonna. All right.
Scene 3, take 1.
Ready.
Forget 3 perf. You're now watching me in 4 perf. Different ratio. So this one's got the same width, so it still fits in there. It's still super 35, but now we've got a height of 18.6 millimeters. So that is a diagonal ratio of 1.34. It's basically 4:3. You're looking at me now in TV ratio, which is why we had to bring in these black bars on either side. But importantly, because we're now exposing more film, we get, effectively more quality. So not the resolution, but one of the limits is the grain size. the actual size of the chemicals and things that are reacting. And by exposing a greater area of film, it makes the grain impact smaller because the grain proportionally is smaller. So even though on your screen the size hasn't changed because we've had to scale it down, the grain size is smaller. All of that said, because we're on a different camera, so here's our original camera A over here, we're now on camera B with the 4-perf gate. We've now switched to 500 tungsten film stock, which has bigger grain, but on the same film stock, by projecting a bigger image, you get better quality. The downside is, of course, it's more expensive because we're going through, like, we're moving 4/3 as much film each time. So this is now costing us 133% of the previous cost. So expensive. And there are ways to get that cost down. There is a very clever bit of analog compression, which I'm going to explain in a moment. But first, there are 2 other easy ways to reduce your cost. One is less film each time. May I introduce you to 2-perf? We are not going to be filming on this. It's ridiculous. That's a mere 9.5 millimeters high. So it's just, look at that. And that's, you're barely, there's a shot, you're going to fit so many more in. So this would be a lot cheaper, but it's ridiculously widescreen. That's a ratio off the top of my head of 2.64. It's all written on the back. So we could do that. We're not going to. The other option is just to use smaller film. So instead of using 35mm film, you could use 16mm, which is like half the size. It's so much cheaper. We should have also hired and set up a 16mm camera. So we did. We have got a 16mm, and now we're going to do a little side-by-side comparison.
Cut.
Love it. Let's get some lunch.
Scene 3A, take 1.
Here's what we're going to do. We have our 35mm film. We are going to put this in camera A, which you have already met. And then over here, we're going to put a 16mm camera, which we haven't put there yet because we need the camera, like the tripod head from underneath this camera. And then we're going to put 16mm film into that one. And because both of these are pointing in exactly the same direction, or they will, we can then do a split screen and you'll be able to see the exact side-by-side comparing 35mm to 16mm. Let's do it. Color chart. Check out those colors.
Great. Did you mention that we're going to put the stock as well?
Oh, wait.
Yep, go.
Second sticks. You can walk right through this, by the way. Go for it. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned some things about film formats and ratios. And I know this is old tech, but it will explain some things you see and hear in modern movie making. And if you hear things like Super 8 or 35mm, you now know what they mean. And if you hear full frame, which is still used in the digital era, that's back from when you'd put it on its side and you'd have the fullest possible frame that fits. And 35mm, this is the same as normal stills film. That's full frame. So I guess IMAX is full frame 65mm. So there you are. That's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. And oh, you know what? There is still the question of why. Why would people want to use film when they can now use digital? And you know what? It's an artistic choice. It's another decision you can make when you're making the art that is cinema. So yeah, digital can do amazing things, incredible looks, but there's something about the look where like light is actually interacting with the layers and the chemicals and the grain. Like you get very specific looks from things like 16mm and IMAX. You should go watch. Find something in the cinema that's in 16mm, find something else that's in IMAX, go and see those, see if you can spot the differences. Watch some movies. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think that's it. How much footage have we got left, Truman, on this roll?
Like 250 feet.
250 feet left. I'll thank some people. I'd like to thank whoever's reversing a truck that's beeping because we can't do another take. This is it. This is the take that's happening. I'd like to thank Keslo, who let us come in, run around, play with all their kit. They've been incredibly supportive, very, very helpful. Huge thanks to Truman, who is a film loader. Pardon?
Dan Ming.
Dan Ming. Thanks to Dan Ming, buddy of Truman's, who hooked us up with this. Thanks to Bec Hill, who made a bunch of the props and has been here doing the slate clapping and all that jazz. And thanks to my Patreon supporters who made this possible. In fact, we'll run some names. Look at these names. Those are Patreon supporters. That could be you. Wait, how much we got left now? We have to have like at least 100 foot.
175.
175 feet. We'll run some names. Check them out. I don't always use your money to buy film. In fact, you didn't even pay for me to get here. I was out here doing some shows anyway. Thanks to everyone who came along. I mentioned in a previous video, doing a show in LA. That was like 2 nights ago. Huge amount of fun. Thanks for coming along. And if you support the channel, I'll make more ridiculous films. I can guarantee each video I make will be ridiculous in its own special way. And so that's it. Thank you for watching the world's first, and I suspect only ever, YouTube video shot on 35mm film. Cut it. And we're back. So we thought, well, we just realized how underexposed this is going to be. We were kind of managing what, oh, we can roll the names again, by the way, more Patreon people. We'd been managing the different film stock we had, but we accidentally left like the least sensitive film for the end of the day when it's a cliche, but we're losing light. So what we're going to do is we're going to underdevelop this, and then we're going to push process it, which is where you leave it in the chemicals for longer when it's being developed. It's like After Effects, but it's just effects. Like you just leave it in the chemical soup for longer after. I guess it's effects after. That works. And so that's why this looks particularly contrasty and particularly grainy, and that's not because we weren't managing our stock and time properly. As I said before, that's an artistic choice. So I just wanted to make that very clear. We've done that deliberately so it looks great, and to run as many of these names through as we can before the film hilariously runs out at the very end of the reel. So thank you so much for watching, and I guess I'll disappear any second now. Here is the analog compression I was promising you earlier, and it's happening right now because we are filming this on the Super 35 4-perf, but it doesn't look like this, does it? Look how wide it is, and that's because we changed the lens. That lens no longer has the image circle we were talking about earlier. It now has an image oval. It's taken the light coming in from the circle and it has squashed it down in a 2-to-1 ratio, and it projects that onto the film. This may not be 100% to scale, but you get the idea. And it projects that onto the 4-perf Super 35. And then in post, we're able to stretch that back out again. And by doubling the horizontal distance, we now get this incredible widescreen that you're looking at. And so this is now a ratio of 1 to 2.68, which you could crop into, but that's just incredibly wide shot. If we undo the stretching in post, it looks like this, real squash. This is what the actual film, that once it's been developed, this is what it looks like. And speaking of the physical film, if you want some, if you're supporting me on Patreon by the end of the month, you can opt in. You have to tell me. If you go to patreon.com/standupmaths, you can say, I paid for the film, I want some. And I will post you some of the film we've taken today. Maybe it'll be this anamorphic shot where we all look squashed. Okay, this is back out to the widescreen. This is a very clever way to still get the 4-perf resolution height, but yet you can get the full widescreen instead of being limited to the 4:3 ratio. Not without its downsides though. If you have a look, if we go out of focus, instead of getting circles from those lights in the background, you get ovals, and lens flare responds differently. So if I get a direct light, in fact, I'm going to give this flashlight to Truman, who's going to shine it into the lens flare is different in the vertical direction compared to the horizontal direction. And that's just because those directions are now different in the lens. I mean, I can even see, if I look down the lens, I can see an oval-shaped aperture instead of the circle-shaped aperture I'm used to. So it's a very clever way to get higher resolution film.
Rolling. Hit slate.
Scene thumbnail. Take 28.
Keep going. Go back in. Do you want to roll out, Matt?
Yeah, we'll roll out.
Yeah, okay.
Because we had to film the thumbnail on film.
We had to film the-
Yeah. Perfect.
The good thing is you still have the sound, so it'll be black.
And then it'll
And
still
you
be
still
running
have
out.
the
Yeah,
sound.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
perfect.
That's pretty funny. All right, so that's a wrap, huh?
That's a wrap, kids.
Amazing.
Well done. Thank you.
Yay, well done, you
50.
guys.
I was dead on with the. I need my Sharpies back. Why'd you take all 3?
That's all I was playing with it. Which ones do you want first?
Black.
Sound is rolling.
Want to double check the frame or anything?
Nah.
All right, ready. And. Hit it.
We have shot 3B. This half is 35 millimeter. You're looking at this. It's not bad quality. I'll put that there. Is that clear? I don't know. And in theory, it should be different on the other side. So if I roll over here, this is the 16 mil side. So this is now 16 mil quality. Actually, I can pop that in the center. And we've done our best to try and line up, because this has to have a wider lens because the film is smaller, whereas over here on the bigger 35 mil film, we've got a more narrow lens on it, but we think they're pretty close, and it's the same film stock. So this is 500 tungsten, and this is 500 tungsten. The only difference is the size of it. And that does save a lot of money. So here, there's your 16 mil to scale with the 35 mil on that side. And there's your Super 16. So that's 12.5 mil by 7.4 millimeters. You pop it in there. It's got a ratio of 1.69. So pretty much the standard widescreen you're looking at this in, and each one is exposing that much of the paper. If you want to go even cheaper, there is Super 8. So when I was a university student many years ago, I did some short films on Super 8. And this half again, and both of these only have the perfs on one side because I guess they're too small to need both. And that's Super 8. Isn't that adorable? Look at the size of that. That is, what was that, 5.8 mil by 4 millimeters. And that's 10 times bigger. That's a 10 to 1 of what you're so small. It's just ridiculous. And you won't ever really use this for anything of note. You will see major motion pictures filmed on Super 16. You will go to the cinema and see something on this, even though it's so much smaller than our 35 mil. There's our Super 35 again. And look at the size difference. So this is where the saving comes from. Because this is half the width, it's half as much to buy the same length of film, but because that's half the height, it goes through at half the speed. And because area scales with the square of length, I think that works, you end up spending a quarter of the money. So over here, this is costing me a quarter of the money. This is a much cheaper way to film. Film on 16. The only exception to when filming on 16 is cheaper is if you're also simultaneously running a 35 mil camera. That puts the budget way back up again. So we're going to stop running 2 cameras right now.
Cut.
You get my toilet flushing in the background?
I don't think so.
Oh, damn.
I heard.
Yeah.
All right, for reference, 190 feet, 100 feet.
Look at that.
Yeah.
The difference is probably the loading is probably the same, isn't it?